Hello, my friend.
Am I
Mark,
here now? Okay,
you
I'm
are
here.
in.
Yes,
You
we're
are
doing
in.
this.
It is great to see you here. Welcome,
Likewise.
welcome. Um,
Thank you.
it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you, and I'm really excited about this conversation. This is the second in our series, and especially with our guest coaches. So I'm really, really delighted that you could make it. Without further ado, Mark is a fantastic, fantastic integrated coach who lives in San Diego, California, with his wife and his son. He believes in the untethered ability to tap into our wildness and manifest our unlimited potential. Yet, this natural ability is often stripped away through the currents of shame and the capital T truth that change is hard. He hopes that his decades of study will guide you to your deepest sense of self, one that aligns with mind, body, and soul. He holds a master's degree in education. He's a yoga alliance instructor and a featured meditation teacher on Inside Timer, and of course, a fantastic group coaching HQ guest coach. Mark, welcome. So happy to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Dom, for having me. I'm excited to talk about this today.
This is going to be a great conversation. So we're going to dive straight in, and we're going to be really thinking about how to nudge your group coaches out of their comfort zone, and you're a master at that. So I'm excited to hear everything that you have to share on the topic. And the first thing I want to bring up is really that when we brought you in, when you did your demo for the group coaching HQ coaches, you started by creating a lot of trust in the group. So I'd love for you to share first why that's really important to you, and then second, concrete ways that you have of doing that.
Yeah, there's so many subtleties to that, and that's something that we could talk about. We can do a whole program on that. How to create a safe and empowering culture for you to really be able to dive in, and do vulnerable work. But the reason it's important is because the essence of group coaching, the way I see it, is about the community that you're in. And people need to feel connected, and they need to feel connected beyond the regular masks that we wear. And so when we take off the mask, when we dive into who we actually are as humans, what happens when we do that is people feel safe. And when people feel safe, little by little, we're able to go a little bit deeper. We're able to go a little bit deeper. And then before you know it, you're being witnessed in a way that you're not used to being witnessed. I think I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but one of the powerful elements of group coaching is something that I think Francis Weller talks really well about, and it's the concept of communitas. And when we allow ourselves to act in derangement, and I'll define what that means in a moment, we're witnessed by community. It's communitas. It creates community, and that's how community gets created. And when I say act in derangement, we live such carefully arranged lives. I mean, everything about the way in which we live throughout the entire world is all about, are you doing it right? Are you wearing the right clothes? Are you saying the right thing? And the joke is this is an experiment. We're all playing a game. These are the current rules that we've decided as a culture that we're going to play with. But when we dig deeper, and we take off the masks, and we allow ourselves to unravel a little bit, and it's a little bit ugly, and it makes us feel uncomfortable. But when we do that in the presence of other people that we feel safe with, we really feel their support, two things happen. One, deep internal change, and then also being accepted by the community. So it all starts off with really clear expectations, like we talk about all the time. But doing an activity, or maybe as a coach, having a vulnerable share yourself. There's other ways to do it, but acknowledging that is key. And one thing I wanted to mention that you do really well with Group Coaching HQ is you filter out, the people that maybe are not ready for group coaching.
Right.
Because a lot of times, in my experience, particularly with deeper work, when you're in a group coaching setting, if one person goes really deep and it makes others feel uncomfortable, then that sets the, not really a great tone for the rest of the program. So being very clear right at the beginning, are these people, ready to do this? Are they aware of their own projections? Are they able to push aside their own insecurities and, allow, someone else's vulnerability to guide them a little bit?
That's amazing, Mark. And I'm making some notes here of some of the points that you've made that are so important for us to consider. First of all, in order to be able to nudge people out of their comfort zone, they need to feel that sense of community. They need to feel that sense of trust and a true community, not around norms that have been set by the outside. And so you brought up the really incredibly important point of creating rules and co-creating rules with the group.
Yeah.
And then the second thing that you just brought up that I think we have to really, really keep hammering in that is so important is how are we vetting the people that we're bringing into the group, and are they prepared? Are they willing to go where they need to go? So
right.
Truly appreciate these 2 points that are so important and that we've really talked about at length with our coachees, with our trainees at Group Coaching HQ, that sometimes we want to bring people in because they might pay us, because they actually are a person to come in the group, and we need to come in the group, and that's totally legitimate. However, spending some time getting to know people is such a win in terms of understanding their commitment and understanding why they're in the program. So really, really appreciate that. And in fact, I want to refer people, I'll put it in the chat later on, to, and then it's on our website, something that is a free download that actually has questions to help you screen your participants, to help people, to help coaches talk to coachees in advance and ask the right questions in terms of commitment and how deep they're willing to go. But going back to the session that you led with our trainees, that was so incredible. You one of the things you did, and that I always admire in everything you do, and every time I get coached by you or I see you coach a group, is that you always use a range of techniques to probe individual coachees to go deeper. Right. And in that session, a couple of people were really pushed out of their comfort zone, and they were quickly required to be pretty deeply vulnerable. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit to the purpose of going deep with just one person when you're in a group setting.
Yeah. There's a lot of nuances, right? So I always hesitate a little bit when you and I are talking in hypothetical right now, because something that I think is really crucial is reading the room. And I think both of us having a background in education kind of helped that out a lot. Anyone who's ever taught a classroom, where you have 30 students in front of you, very quickly who's in the room and who's not. And you can read that, right? And it's an energy. So that's super important, is going into a room and reading it right away, reading the person. I would not do a one size fits all approach to everybody, because when you the topic that we're talking about today, nudging someone out of their comfort zone, there's a danger to it, and so the last thing that we want to do is re-traumatize a person. And being trauma informed, I highly encourage that for every coach. But when I enter into a room and I bring the groups together, right, and we talk about what are our expectations, we then go ahead and usually I'll do some one-to-one. If it's in person, I'll do usually some sort of eye gazing or something like that to develop trust. But then after they feel connected to the group, I'll then go into typically, like you mentioned here, some aspect of one-to-one. And again, that goes back to that community building, because when and it's usually volunteer based, who's the first person that goes. I might use the popular term, who wants to be in the hot seat, right? That's just because it honors that seat. It takes a lot of courage to go into that. And one of the promises that I make to my clients, and one of the expectations that I make clear with them is, of course, I ask them, what do they want from me? One of the things I will say is, my job here is to push. My job here is to pull. My job here is to expand, to poke and to prod with curiosity, compassion, but yet be challenging. Those 3 C's are often what I build with: curiosity, being curious, being compassionate, and being challenging. And so they know that I'm already going to do that. So anyhow, when one goes into the seat, I'll start talking with them. Yeah. And the easy answer is that just tools, intuitively pop up and I go, oh, I should try this. But it comes from the person that I'm speaking with. I use a concept called the 4 windows of knowing often when I enter into a coaching relationship with the person. And let's see if I remember the 4 off the top of my head. But it's knowing, so thinking. Okay, so it's thinking. It's sensing, it's feeling, and then what's the 4th one here?
Imagination.
Imagination. Thank you. That's the one actually I use the most. But those are 4 different ways to help someone gain perspective, right? And so I'll choose one of those and I'll go down that road. The somatic element is often super powerful for a lot of people because they're not used to that. But yet when we tune into our bodies, it opens up new windows for us to see through, right? But going back to the original question is, again, when I go with one person, and we do, sometimes it's only 10 or 15 minutes, but they get witnessed by everyone else in the group. At the end of it, and to be clear to our listeners out there, when you do deep coaching with one person in face of a group, fair warning here, the transition time from going to that one-to-one to back to the group, make it twice as long as you think it should be, right? And the reason for that is the nervous system needs to recalibrate, because that person all of a sudden just got really vulnerable and they feel naked. They figuratively feel naked, they feel exposed, and that's dangerous. So that's a dangerous feeling. So our protectors come online there. So what we have to do as coaches is transition carefully, and it could be as simple as saying, one thing I often do, I think I did this in the group coaching HQ, is silence with breathing and look around the room and and see everyone witness who you are and appreciate you. And then I ask the group to send a note of love or send some light or just send some appreciation. If I have more time, I'll ask each person to say, tell me one strength that you just witnessed in whatever their name was, right? But that transition again allows them to feel safe re-entering the world as this new this new version of themselves that they got to embody and experience. One thing I also really want to mention, which is why I'm such an advocate for group coaching, is in one-to-one coaching, we help people break through. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love who I am when I'm with you. And one of the issues with coaching is this learned helplessness, right? Meaning, we don't want, as coaches, we're trying to work ourselves out of a job. We're trying to get that person to be able to show up in the way they show up with us without us being there. And so with group coaching, what ends up happening is it's one stage closer to bringing that new way of being into the real world. So now you have your pack. We're pack animals in a way. We have our community. And going with self-determination theory here, how we actually step into a self-authored mind, one of the elements is connectedness. We need to feel our community. Again, we're pack animals, we're village people. And so when you have a group and that, okay, there's 5 people that I know this version of me, they're going to hold me accountable. There's a comfort level to when you then go and try to embody this new way of being to other people who challenge it, right, and make you feel uncomfortable. Typically, it's the family. The family is always the hardest, or coworkers that you've been with in a while who have an expectation of who you are. So when you try to show up with new behaviors, they try to challenge it, whether it's conscious or not. But if you already have your group, if you already have your 5 or 6 people that know this version of you that you want to embody, it's extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. It's a fraternal element that is just, the ripple effect is huge.
Thank you, Mark. That so many of the things that you said resonated, and especially having watched you coach so many times. So I want to bring up a few things that you shared, because you hammered us with so much there, which is fantastic. And I encourage anyone who is listening to go back to the recording and listen again, because this was so rich.
Feel free to slow me down. I tend to unravel onions, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is delicious. Oh, look at this new piece, and I just go.
And another thing.
So just say, hey, Mark, stop, and go into that a little bit deeper. I'm happy to.
No, this was fantastic, and so a couple of things that I want to bring up. And Susan here, who's watching, also made a point of it. You talked about being trauma informed, and this is something we also talk about with Jillian, our DEI expert, when she comes into the group, and really thinking about understanding where people are coming from, understanding that each person is different.
Our story defines us in a way.
Exactly. And when you came into our group, this was your first time meeting everyone, and you just threw it, you threw yourself into this amazing session, and our group trainees were very open to being there and to being challenged. And we had a discussion afterwards, because they're all coaches. And so that's a little different from having a group of people who are not coaches. And so really appreciate what you brought up in terms of needing to first create that safety, that environment where people feel that they are okay to take risks. And we talked last week with Marsha and Catherine about that, about creating that safety in the group. They're
wonderful coaches.
What was that? Sorry.
They're fantastic coaches. Catherine.
They're amazing. They're both amazing. You also talked about a couple of things that are really that really resonated, and that I want to bring up again. One was you said, I use my intuition. And as a coach, what better tool do we have but our intuition, in terms of reading the room, but also understanding what tool do I need to use in order to support and challenge this person. And one of the things that that brings up for me is this understanding of how much, as coaches, we need to consistently learn and increase our own toolbox. And so
it's an infinite game.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit about some of the tools that you used. You used a range of techniques in that session. And actually, let me go back to something else that I want to bring up, because it can be really challenging for us as coaches to really be risk takers. And so Toolbox made me think, in order for us to feel comfortable as coaches, taking the risk, challenging the group, going deeper, we need to continue to train ourselves. We need to continue to learn. We need to continue to feel comfortable with the tools that allow us to do that. And having seen you coach many times, I know that you thrive from being able to take risks in your own coaching and to challenge the coachees at the same time. So actually, I'm going to ask you, what helped you develop this skill of being a risk taker in your own coaching?
Great question. And there's a couple things that come to mind for me. Fear to me is so important. Fear to me is one of our greatest guides. And when I, really want to be courageous, when I really step into my courage, It's acknowledging a fear I have and then walking discerningly, not jumping into it. I made those mistakes in my 20s, but walking into that cave, into that fear, feeling that uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
And it's just always led to great places. So in my own personal work, I do think that as coaches, one of our duties is to consistently challenge ourselves. I think it's a major problem if all of a sudden we think I've done it all, right? Because as coaches, we're not gurus. We're just guides we're mirrors. We're reflecting. We're helping someone see a version of themselves. We're, a lot of the stuff that one of the greatest ironies I think as coaches, by the way, is oftentimes in my coaching practice, a client will come to me with a problem that I have, and I'm laughing because I'm coaching them, but I'm also coaching me at the same time. It's just interesting, kind of like big picture, story, like joke, that like a dramatic irony,
Totally.
But again, how I learn the technique. So I listen to the fear and what challenges me, and I've done a lot of stuff that has challenged me in the last few years. In particular, the somatic elements were really quite a breakthrough for me. I've teaching is generally a very cerebral concept. And I was a very cerebral person for quite some time. Since I was a kid, I started practicing meditation. I have quite a journey, into the mindfulness sector, which got me to be a featured meditation teacher on Insight Timer. And I was, very fortunate to live next to this place called Omega Institute, which is an amazing place in New York. Yeah, and I got to go there a lot and interact one-to-one with these great teachers who are offering these new concepts to explore life, who we are. And I just find that to be so beneficial. So, to kind of answer your question, it's consistently challenging myself and then learning, okay, well, what's helped me? And then also entering into training programs to see what's working for others. So like, for instance, right now, I'm currently in really learning and exploring internal family systems. Internal family systems has been very helpful for me in my own practice, but I also have been building a men's group for the past 2 years. And I've had a lot of men come my way as clients. And so what I often want to explore is, well, how can I better serve them? And one way that I found to really better serve the men that I get the honor to work with is through IFS and through somatic, somatic coaching, and that trauma-informed element that we talked about before, right? Because my big thing is I like to help people align personal values with professional goals. I don't think we need to have two different, versions of ourselves. I think alignment is what we really need. So another thing as well is I love the craziness.
I know you do.
My wife said the other day, she's like, there's a part of you that just really loves things that sort of put the middle finger up to regular culture. And I was like, yeah, I do, because I think we have a lot of growth in this culture. We're really behind. And as a general society, there's so much more that we could offer people in how we live and how we do this thing called life, right? And I can go all day on that, but so I'm curious, who are the people that are really challenging the paradigm? Who are offering these new edgy, techniques? I'm going to go and experiment and play with those myself. So Bill Plotkin's work has been astronomically influential in my life, and he started the Animas Valley Institute, which really brings together his PhD in psychotherapy with indigenous wisdom and the vision quests. And it's deeply rooted in feeling connected to the earth. And so I spent a lot of time alone in the wild, allowing the wild to guide me, and I'm literally almost getting killed. And I'm not joking about that. I definitely found my edge, and I went, oh boy, yep, reel it back, Mark. I could tell the story there, but let's just say I was at the top of the mountain in a t-shirt and shorts, and it started snowing, and I didn't know where I was. And I just thought, I'm in trouble here because I had no cell signal. Very stupid New Yorker move, New Yorker to California, learned my lesson. Anyhow, all these amazing mystical experiences occurred, and they taught me so much about myself. And I went, wow, okay, there's something here. And so to wrap up, I allow my intuition to guide me. And then I say, how can I bring this back to my clients? And that is an infinite game that I will continue to do. The next thing that I'm doing as well, by the way, is free diving, because I'm utterly terrified of the dark water. I'm utterly terrified of sharks, but I know that there's a part of me that can learn something through stepping into that fear. So I have a free diving coach who's teaching me how to do that.
Brilliant. I'm curious as you're sharing all this, and actually before I ask you this question, I want to let those who are listening to us that please, if you have questions for Mark, put them in the comments. We'll absolutely get to them. I'm curious, before we get to Alex's question about your mystical experiences, and so please keep that in mind.
All right.
My curiosity is asking so you're living all these experiences, you're bringing this back to your clients, and I'm wondering how much of your own risk-taking, learning, fear-facing, courageous being do you share with your clients in your group? Because that's a question we often get. Like, how much should I share of myself? So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
That's a great question. That is a great question that I don't know if I have the right answer to.
There is no right answer.
Because I'll tell you the way that I do it. I'm not sure how to say this without coming across as extremely arrogant, and that's not my intention. But the way in which I enter into my coaching relationships is I say, how much of me can this person hold? How much of me can this person hold? Because there are elements of my life. And besides, it's a couple things here. First of all, how much of me can this person hold? And is it actually helpful for the relationship? Because there is that element as well as, curious, compassionate, and challenging. I want to be, in one degree, when I'm with the client, I want to be empty of self. I don't want that person to feel that they can only bring parts of themselves to me. I want them to feel like they can bring all to me. And quite honestly, with, again, the background in education, is I've been trained to empty who I am so that I can show up for my clients. So, you're familiar with the coactive coaching concept, right? And in the coactive coaching, a lot of times it is about building a relationship that is subjective. And so, yes, I will share things. And I believe in leadership is vulnerability. So if it is necessary, I will absolutely share challenges I'm having currently. I will have somatic experiences. I will cry. But again, it goes back to the question, is this helpful for the coaching relationship? Because I put on a coaching hat. I wear a collared shirt when I'm working, right? This is me working right now. When I'm outside of the coaching relationship and I'm, just being marked, that's different. That's a different energetic exchange. That's a different promise that I'm making, right? So anyhow, I can go deeper into that, but there's a couple elements. Again, just to summarize, what will be helpful for this relationship? How much of me can that person, hold, right, without scaring them away? And then, again, the biggest premise is showing up in a way where my client is able to fully share what's deep within their heart. And I will just say this, particularly when it comes to men's coaching, there's a lot of shame in a lot of concepts. So a lot of times in a coaching relationship, because confidentiality is a non-negotiable, right? And I'm talking about even general confidentiality. Like I won't even say, I had a client who said, those type of things, even general conversation, you got to be careful with, right? So there are things that come up where all of a sudden a person shares it, whether it's a fantasy that they have that would, destroy a relationship, or whether it's like rage or deep anger that they have that, Jung had this concept of the monster, whether it's coming in relationship with your own monster inside. Like there's all these different ways I can talk about, but when someone is able to explore that, and I'm like, yeah, I know exactly, that's great. Bring it, right? All of a sudden it's like an exhale for them. They're able to show up in a way where, they didn't realize they were holding that in. And again, that goes to that derangement. I'm trying to help them, take off anything that is limiting them from actually exploring who's this amazing being, How does that answer the question? I realize there's nuances there.
It does. I really appreciate you thinking about and mentioning how you take a step away from yourself so that you can objectively look at what's helpful for the person in front of you. And I think often in group coaching, a lot of coaches think that they have to hold all the answers. They show up as a teacher.
Yeah, big mistake.
Right, exactly. And so I really appreciate you being able to say, what's going to be helpful for this person and how much do I want to inject into the group? Because often as a coach, the best thing we can do is actually take a step back and let the stories unfold and let the stories from the participants unfold.
Yeah,
so
more Yoda, less superhero.
Exactly. I love that. I love it when you share that. I always love
Well, that's from Jonathan Raymond, who's a mentor of mine. His work is great. But yeah, more Yoda, less superhero.
That's the one. Mark, we have a lot of questions here, so I'd love to.
Awesome. Where are we live? We're live on LinkedIn, right? I'm just seeing you on the screen here. So
we're live on LinkedIn,
all over the world. I love it.
YouTube. So we have a couple of questions for you, and I'm gonna let you choose what you'd like to answer. So
sure, yeah.
Alex is curious about your mystical experiences. We have Susan who'd love to, and a few people have said that they'd love to learn more about the things you're talking about. So I'm wondering, and I don't want to put you on the spot, if you might be able to compile a quick list of resources, perhaps, that we can send to our mailing list together with the recording of this conversation so that everyone can have it.
Can I list 3 resources right now just because they're on top of mind?
Please, sure.
Yeah, okay. So number 1, integral theory. Ken Wilber's Integral Theory is fantastic. There's a book called Integral Theory Practice, I believe. Very simple book to read. Ken Wilber's writing is actually very difficult to read. I wouldn't read his actual writing, but this book, I think it's called Integral Life Practice. Fantastic. Second, Wild Mind by Bill Plotkin, an amazing way to take a look at four directions and how they influence what he defines as self. And then the third one, Internal Family Systems. Those are basically my coaching practice. Those are the 3 frameworks that I tend to pull on most often.
Thank you. Amazing. And we'll put those in the email as well. And there's a question here from Jordan asking, what techniques do you employ when you realize you may have pushed a coachee too far and now need to pull back? Which I think is a question.
Yeah, do you want me to start with that one?
Yes, that would be great, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's difficult to talk about that in hypothetical, right? What's the situation? What happened? What comes to mind right now for me would be to apologize and to call attention and say, hey, I think I may have pushed you a little bit too far, and and I apologize for that if I crossed the line, and have an honest conversation about it. A lot of times in my experience, if that is what happened, the person then realizes it, and then you talk about how to move forward, right? I can't say that that's happened often. It's funny that I'm here as the quote expert about nudging coachees out of their comfort zone, when in reality I look at myself as an extremely discerning person who is I step very carefully. So it's funny that I'm being known, and you're not the only one. I've had many who say, you do these crazy things in your coaching set. I was like, I don't think these are crazy. I'm not like slipping LSD into someone's tea and then like taking them skydiving, right? No, well, that is another way, but I don't see myself as that. Because of that reason, I am very careful. And again, with coaching, it's a long-term game. When I came into Group Coaching HQ, there's a promise. These are coaches. Coaches, they're okay with being challenged a little bit more, right? When I'm being brought into a coaching relationship with a referral, someone that I've never met in my life, but until that day, it takes a few coaching sessions to get to a point. I need to feel them out, and I need to know, again, the trauma informed. What's their story, right? What is the dial? where are they at currently, and what would be one notch forward. If they're at a 2 out of 10, I don't want to take them to a 9. That's not helpful. That's trauma. Too fast, too soon, right? So again, that trauma informed is really, really key. And just to throw it back, oftentimes, Jordan, what I do is I throw it back at the client. So like a basic question here is, when you say that, on a 0 through 10, where do you feel you currently are, 10 being success? Oh, I'm at a 2. What would it take to turn that up to a 3? And I allow them to sort of, and if I know that they're at a 2, well, then that's pretty low, right? So there's all these other nuances. Another one, what's your internal weather? How are you checking in today? How much do you want to be pushed? I ask for consent all the time. And in the group coaching HQ, if you watch the recording, I'm pretty sure, and if I haven't, call me out, every single time I worked with someone, and in every single time I asked for consent. Is it okay if I push you here?
Yep.
Yeah.
I was actually going to mention that. I've seen you do that, and I think that's such an important part of building trust that we don't necessarily think about. And actually, not only in group coaching, in our one-on-one coaching practice, asking for permission is incredibly important. And I have seen you do that. And the other thing that I've seen you do, which I think continues to build that trust, is to thank people for being vulnerable, for saying what they needed to say, and for opening up in front of the group. And so asking for permission and thanking people. Jordan is confirming that you did ask.
Yeah, good. Yeah. That sounds so simple, but it's extremely important. And one of the skills too is a lot of times we as a culture have difficulty saying no.
Yeah.
We're part of this, yes, do more, type of culture, which is so toxic, right? And so sometimes the breakthrough is when someone says, no, actually, I don't want to be pushed more. Or actually, no, I don't want to do that. Great. Fantastic. You learned your boundary. You learned an edge, and saying no takes a lot of courage to do that, I want to also mention, I talked about the 4 windows of knowing, imagination being one of them. One of the things that does happen for those that are interested in that aspect is when you go into the imaginal realm. So using imagination, using visualization, stuff like that. It often has a couple ripple effects, like it affects the dreams at night. And there's also a vulnerability hangover because you're working with the emotional body. So again, these are nuanced things that, in my EFT background, like looking at emotional freedom technique and all of that, got me to understand that when you start opening up the emotions through the imaginal realm or through the visualizations, your dreams are pretty powerful that night, and they could freak you out a little bit. So calling attention, hey, just so you know, your dreams might be a little crazy tonight. Just so you know. Hey, just so you know, you may experience a vulnerability hangover. You may feel so safe right here with me, and then go to your spouse or go to your kids or go to your coworkers and try to show up with this level again. And now that your heart's completely open, and all of a sudden you're going to get, you could get really hurt. So just, be discerning, know that might happen. And just simply giving that sort of, caution is enough for them to be able to step further.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think having in a group setting, being able to rely on the group for support when this happens is also just
100%.
Just so helpful, because you're not evolving through the world with this new insight, with this new way of being. Truly, you've made an actual change in who you are alone. You have your community. You have people around you who understand.
You have your people.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's two key things, and Bill Plotkin talks about this a lot in the book Nature and the Human Soul. But there's 2 key elements that need to occur for one to step into what he calls true adulthood. And what that is an authentic way of being in a community that sees and loves and supports you. Those 2 things are really difficult to do because, first of all, authenticity is a lifetime of work, because we just get fed a lot of BS about what it means to be human. And then finding your people. Like these are, there's a lot to that.
Definitely. Mark, we've got about 5 minutes left, 4 minutes.
Yeah, this is fun. I love hanging out with you, Dom. And
I know,
I feel like
I
we're
love
in
hanging out
France
with
and we're
you.
just hanging out. This is fantastic.
All these conversations for me are always love fests. I'm bringing my favorite people to talk about topics that I'm passionate about. So this is the best for me. But this is your time. So I would love to hear what you think you might not have mentioned that you feel is really important for people out there, to coaches out there, to know and think about when they're trying to push people out of their comfort zone in a safe and supportive way.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, just I feel like I mentioned most of the things. Nothing's coming to mind right now. Just going back though to the element of pushing yourself, and finding out, because this is what's coming to me right now is I think we could forget what it's like, what that feeling is like, being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But being uncomfortable is not enjoyable often, right? It's really difficult. And coaches really struggle with this as well, because we do have this persona that we have it all together, and the more famous you get, the higher your income is, like all these signals that say I'm a great coach. They can feed this narrative that I've got it all together. And so so acting deranged becomes harder. It does, because there's a lot more to lose, right?
I love your language here. Acting deranged.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and so for me, it's constantly finding opportunities to to sense into that element of discomfort or of uncomfortableness. I will say what's really important for me is I do have my groups of people. I have several groups that I'm a part of where I don't show up as Mark, the coach. It's a co-creative, collaborative, group, and we all challenge each other in different ways, and we bring different elements to the meetings. But that's a space where I am challenged. Also in this, in my training where I'm being trained right now, I intentionally say, even if I feel like, hey, I can do a better job than the trainees, which is always the case, right? Whenever you're a facilitator, it's like, I can do better. There's always that narrative. But putting in the hat of, no, I'm a coachee here. I'm a client. And allowing yourself to actually feel uncomfortable, and stepping into that is just really, really crucial. And again, going back to that fear, what's it like? I'm literally terrified of stepping in the ocean. I go surfing and all that, but for some reason, deep dives in the water, sharks, I have this story since I was a kid in my mind, this vision of a great white appearing right there. But I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it, right? Another one is, just to get really vulnerable here for a second, I'll go and walk on the nude beach. Not comfortable for me, right? But I'll go and do that because I'm like, okay, this is what uncomfortable feels like, right? And yeah, and there's this, that's so important, I think, to continue to feel so that you can empathize with your clients.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for being you, for bringing your whole self to this conversation and sharing just so many nuggets. I'm sure that whoever is watching right now will be watching this many, many times over. We'll send some of your resources with the email that also shares the recording to this video. In the meantime, I want to let everyone know we're really, really excited. The applications for Group Coaching HQ September cohorts are open. We cannot wait. Mark will be leading a session. So will Catherine and Marsha that were on the show last week. And we'll continue these conversations. So I'm going to add to the chat a few links. Would love for you to join us on our mailing list, to follow us on LinkedIn, learn more about Group Coaching HQ. There's also a link right there to learn more about Mark and understand what his work is about, so you can also connect with him. And for now, I think we're good to go. I just want to say another huge thank you to you, Mark, and to everyone who tuned in today. Hope that you can make it to our next conversation. We have one next Tuesday around the same time. And we're going to do, I think, 3 or 4 more. So really, really excited to see more of you guys coming into these conversations. And Mark, to see you at our next Group Coaching HQ cohort. So thank you so much for today.
You're very welcome, Dom. Thank you so much for 2 reasons. One, for creating this. I know the amount of work that it takes to do that, and you've done such a beautiful job at building a very powerful learning environment. So thank you for that, and it's truly an honor to be invited here and to be a guest coach. I'm grateful, very grateful for it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.